I was 68 that spring morning, standing in the quiet light of my Charleston kitchen when the knock came. The air carried the faint salt of the harbor, the sound of gulls echoing over the rooftops. I hadn't seen my daughter Seren in nearly 6 months. We'd texted on birthdays, exchanged polite updates, but real visits had become rare, like finding summer snow. When I opened the door, she was there, sunlight catching the copper in her hair, a brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hollis trailed behind her phone, still in hand, smiling like a man who'd rehearsed. They looked polished, successful, the kind of couple that took matching vacations and posted filtered sunsets. Mom Seren said, stepping forward to hug me, "You look wonderful." It was the kind of compliment people give to fill silence. I returned the hug anyway, breathing in her perfume, a scent too sharp for morning. "We have something for you," she said, voice warm, careful. Hollis held out a golden envelope embossed with a logo I didn't recognize. "A gift," she added. "You've worked so hard your whole life. It's time you relaxed." Inside were 2 glossy cruise tickets, the Ecliptica Dawn, 7 days through the Caribbean Isles. The kind of dream trip I used to cut out of magazines but never dared to book. My fingers trembled slightly over the embossed lettering. "Oh, Seren," I murmured. "This must have cost a fortune." "Please," Hollis said. "You deserve it. You've always been taking care of everyone else." I smiled, though my chest felt heavy. For a moment, I saw my husband Everett as he'd been 40 years ago, thin and sunburned from long days teaching maritime history at the college, laughing about how he'd take me on a cruise when we could finally afford it. He died before we ever saved enough. After that, every dollar went to Seren's education, her apartment, her new life. I never minded. That's what mothers do. We pour ourselves out like water and hope the glass fills somewhere else. Seren leaned against the counter chatting about the ship, the first-class suite, how she'd taken care of all the details. Her voice flowed like a brochure, smooth rehearsed. When I mentioned the dates, she looked away just for a second too long. "It leaves in 2 days," she said. "Everything's arranged. You just have to show up." I nodded, forcing a smile. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was her way of bridging the distance between us. Yet something in the air and off-note lingered like perfume gone sour. After they left, I stood by the window watching their car disappear down East Bay Street, the golden envelope resting on my table. The late light turned it the color of old honey. I told myself not to be suspicious, that maybe love sometimes wore awkward clothes. Still, I left the envelope unopened beside my cup of tea for a long time, listening to the creak of the house settle around me, wondering what exactly this sudden calm was meant to hide. That afternoon, the sunlight slipped low through the lace curtains, cutting the living room into strips of gold and shadow. Seren had stayed longer than I expected, pacing between the doorway and the window, her phone buzzing every few minutes. She kept silencing it with a quick glance and a forced laugh. "Everything's set," she said suddenly, as though to herself. "You'll leave Friday morning. Hollis will drive you to the port." "Friday?" I frowned. "That's 2 days away." She smiled, wide and bright. "Spontaneity, Mom. It's good for the heart." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my daughter had finally remembered the woman who used to braid her hair, who worked double shifts to send her to college. But something in her tone, too practiced, too polished, didn't sound like the Seren I knew. When Hollis returned from the kitchen, I turned to him. "Thank you for this," I said softly. "It's such a thoughtful gift." He froze for the briefest moment, then gave a small, quick nod. "Of course, Mrs. Wynne. You deserve it." His voice carried the polite finality of a waiter setting down a check. He didn't meet my eyes. I watched him step outside to take a call. One hand in his pocket, his expression drawn tight as wire. Seren followed him with her gaze before noticing my stare. "Hollis has been under a lot of stress," she said lightly. "Work has been brutal. You know how business can be." I didn't. I hadn't been part of their world for years. After Everett died, the space between my daughter and me filled slowly with things unsaid. She'd married young, moved north, and built a life that didn't have room for my gentle questions. Lately, our conversations had become short, practical exchanges. Birthdays, reminders, the occasional request for a little help until next month. 2 months ago, she'd called asking if I could float them for a mortgage payment. I'd wired the money the same day and never heard a thank you. I told myself she was busy. That's what mothers do. We keep finding reasons to forgive. Now she was sitting across from me on the same worn sofa, where she used to fall asleep, watching cartoons, scrolling through her phone, smiling too much at nothing. So I began carefully which travel agency handled the booking. I'll need to check my medication list with them. Make sure they know about the cabin requirements. She hesitated just enough to notice. Oh, Hollis took care of that. Everything's electronic now. You don't have to worry about a thing. Still, I said I'd like to have a contact number. In case of emergencies. I'll text it to you, she said quickly, slipping her phone into her purse. It's all under control, Mom. Just enjoy this, okay? For once in your life. She stood and kissed my forehead before I could answer. The scent of her perfume lingered even after the door closed behind them. I sat there for a long time listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the fading echo of her heels on the porch steps. When I finally rose to clean the cups, something caught the light on the table. The golden envelope. She must have left it behind. I reached for it, intending to put it aside, but paused when I saw the logo in the corner, a silver compass, encircled by a name I'd never heard. Azure Voyages Private. It didn't sound like any mainstream cruise line or travel company. I traced the embossed emblem with my thumb. The metal foil felt rough under my skin, as if the paper itself carried a secret. Outside, the wind shifted, and the sea air from the harbor pressed against the windows, faintly damp and restless. For the first time in years, the house felt too quiet, like the moment before a storm, when every bird falls silent. The morning of departure came clear and bright, Charleston glittering under a wash of spring sun. My suitcase waited by the door, tagged and tidy the way Everett used to leave his briefcase before a lecture. The taxi was due in 20 minutes. Saran had called the night before, reminding me to just enjoy it and to leave all the worrying to her. I tried to follow that advice as I slipped on my cardigan and reached for my handbag. That's when I realized my blood pressure medicine wasn't inside. The small white bottle I always kept in the cabinet beside the mirror was missing. I hesitated. Should I risk the time, then sighed and called the driver to wait 5 more minutes. The house was only 6 blocks away. I told myself it was nothing, just forgetfulness. But as I walked up the porch steps, an unease prickled the back of my neck. Saran's car was still parked out front. I hadn't noticed it earlier among the oak shadows. The front door wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar, the way it sometimes stayed when the latch caught on damp wood. I pushed gently. It opened without sound. Inside, the familiar smell of lavender cleaner and old pine met something new. Voices. Muffled, intimate. I froze in the hallway. Saren's tone drifted from the living room, low and smooth like water sliding over glass. Don't worry, Hollis, she said, her voice calm, almost affectionate. It's a one-way ticket. No one questions a fall at sea. There was a silence so complete, I could hear the tick of the mantel clock, each second landing like a hammer. Hollis spoke next, his voice taut. You're sure about this? Completely. The life insurance clears in 30 days. She has the house, the annuity, the savings account, more than enough to cover everything. Once she's out there, it'll look like an accident. An old woman, bad balance, rough seas. People will be sympathetic. I pressed a hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. My own daughter's voice, steady, efficient, spoke of my death as if it were a math problem. Saren Hollis said quietly, "What if she won't suspect? She trusts me." I stepped back, the edge of the door, cool against my palm. For a moment, the world blurred. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, a fast, erratic drum. Then beneath the terror, something else began to rise, a sharp, lucid calm. I moved silently to the kitchen, retrieved the forgotten medicine bottle, and stood in the dim light of the window. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, pale, motionless eyes burning with disbelief. I thought of the nights Seren had been sick as a child, how I'd sat beside her bed, whispering lullabies, how I'd worked 3 jobs so she could study architecture instead of settling for less. Every sacrifice, every small joy, rewritten in an instant. Through the wall, Seren's voice softened again. Once she's on board, it's easy. No one questions anything that happens at sea. That was when I understood. My life had been signed away, and my trust was the pen. I capped the medicine bottle, slid it into my purse, and stepped toward the door. My knees felt weak, but my mind was already moving fast, deliberate. On the porch, the wind from the harbor caught at my hair. The taxi waited by the curb, the driver leaning against the hood, unaware that the woman approaching him had just overheard her own execution plan. I smiled as I climbed in. The act came easier than I expected. "Port terminal, please," I said. My voice didn't tremble. As the car rolled forward, the houses blurred into streaks of color, and I felt the weight of years shift inside me. Fear had burned itself clean, leaving something colder and steadier behind. "All right, sweetheart," I murmured under my breath, watching the water flash between the trees. "We'll do it your way." The Charleston terminal shimmered under a noon sun, so sharp it made the water look like broken glass. Passengers streamed toward the pier in colorful waves, families laughing, couples clutching passports, the air thick with sunscreen and anticipation. I gripped my small suitcase tighter, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. The Ecliptica dawn loomed ahead like a floating city, 12 decks high, bright white, with lines of gold trim that caught the sunlight. The name gleamed in perfect navy script along the hull, the letters so elegant they almost mocked me. Somewhere inside that beautiful machine, I was supposed to disappear. I smiled at the port attendant who took my boarding pass, keeping my voice cheerful. "First cruise," I said, as if the words themselves were a charm against suspicion. "Then you're in for a treat, ma'am," he replied, scanning my ticket. "All inclusive. First class cabin. You're one lucky lady, lucky." The words sat like iron in my chest. As I stepped onto the gangway, the scent of diesel and sea salt thickened. I let my eyes wander, not idly, but searching. Cameras mounted above the ramp. 2 exits to the main deck. Crew members in crisp uniforms moving with trained efficiency. I noted faces, badges, the rhythm of their steps. I would not be caught unprepared. Inside the ship was dazzling marble floors, sweeping staircases, chandeliers that trembled with light. A steward in white gloves offered me a flute of champagne. I declined politely and kept walking, feeling the soft hum of the engines beneath my feet. The ship was alive, breathing, shifting, waiting. At the elevator bank, a young crew member named Marcel noticed my hesitation. First time at sea, he asked, smiling with practiced warmth. "Yes," I said. My daughter insisted. "Said I needed to learn how to relax?" He laughed softly. "Then you're in good hands, ma'am. The Ecliptica takes care of everyone." I thanked him, but as the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirror panel. The woman staring back wasn't the kind who needed taking care of. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes too clear. My cabin was on Deck 9, spacious, tastefully furnished, a balcony overlooking the harbor. On the small table rested a fruit basket and a folded card, "Wishing you tranquility and renewal." Serene's handwriting, looping and elegant. I ran my fingers over the words, feeling the faint indentation of her pen. I unpacked slowly, noting every feature of the room, the sliding balcony door, the location of the smoke alarm, the emergency call button. Years of motherhood had trained me to anticipate, to protect. Now those instincts were sharpened into survival. When the horn sounded announcing departure, I stepped out onto the balcony. Charleston's skyline glowed in the distance, pale against the water. I should have felt wonder. Instead, I felt the pulse of quiet defiance. If Seren thought the ocean would swallow me without a trace, she had forgotten who taught her how to swim. As the ship pulled away from shore, I whispered to the wind, "You raised a fighter, darling. You just didn't know it." By the second evening, the Ecliptica dawn had settled into its rhythm, a floating city of leisure. Laughter spilled from the piano lounge, the clink of glasses echoed through the atrium, and somewhere above, a band was playing Sinatra for an audience too sunburned to dance. I'd spent most of the day pretending to be what everyone else seemed to be, relaxed, carefree, alive, for pleasure alone. But the act had its weight. Each smile I forced left an ache in my jaw. Every time a crew member greeted me with easy cheer, I wondered if one of them already knew my name. That night I dressed in navy silk and went to the ship's main dining hall, an ocean of white tablecloths, glinting silverware and candlelight that trembled with the ship's movement. The maitre d' guided me to a small table by the window. I preferred corners, places where I could watch without being watched. As I sat, another woman approached, dressed in a deep red shawl that caught the light like fine wine. Her hair was silver and smooth, her back straight, her steps deliberate. She smiled with the calm assurance of someone who'd spent her life commanding rooms where truth and lies wore the same suit. "Would you mind if I joined you?" she asked. "I find it impossible to eat alone when the sea looks so forgiving." "Please," I said, gesturing to the empty seat. She extended her hand. Maribel Crane, Miami, retired federal judge. That last part explained the posture, the quiet authority that wrapped around her like an invisible robe. "Alarice Wynne," I replied. "Charleston. Retired. Everything, I suppose." Maribel laughed softly. "Then we're both graduates of life's longest trial." Her humor disarmed me. As the waiter poured water, she leaned slightly closer. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes," I said. "My daughter thought it was time I took a vacation." "Ah." Her tone carried the weight of unspoken things. "And does your daughter often give you surprises?" "Not lately," I admitted. This one caught me off guard. We ordered salmon and wine. Conversation came easily after that. Not the polite chatter of strangers, but something quieter, more genuine. We spoke of widowhood, of how silence sounds different when there's no one to share it with. She told me her husband had been a trial lawyer, that after his death, the walls of their Miami house grew too large, the air too still. "My son lives in Seattle," she said. "He calls when he remembers, sends Christmas cards signed by his wife." I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I nodded. My daughter and I drifted. It happens slowly, doesn't it? One missed call at a time. Maribel studied me for a moment. "You have kind eyes," she said. "But they're restless, like someone who's watching for something to go wrong." The fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Do they—" "Years in the courtroom, dear. I read people the way some read contracts. You're frightened of something, but you're also planning." Her words landed with uncanny precision. For the first time since the morning I left home, I felt seen. "I suppose I've had my share of worry," I said carefully. "Worry is one thing," she replied. "Survival is another. The difference shows in the shoulders." We lingered long after dessert, watching the horizon disappear into a velvet darkness. The ship moved gently beneath us, the steady pulse of engines masking the roar of the sea below. When the waiter cleared the table, Maribel placed her napkin down with the care of someone finishing a verdict. "If you ever need company, I'm in cabin 1103. And I don't sleep much. Old habit from the bench, always half awake." I thanked her, touched in a way I hadn't expected. As we parted in the corridor, she turned once more and said, "You have the look of a woman who's standing in a storm, Alarice. Just remember, storms reveal more than they destroy." That night back in my cabin, her words echoed through me. For the first time since the cruise began, I wasn't completely alone. The fourth morning at sea began deceptively calm. The ocean had softened overnight, the sky a bright porcelain blue, stretching endlessly around the ecliptica dawn. I was having breakfast with Maribel in the quiet corner of the cafe when my phone buzzed across the table. Serene. The name alone set a tremor through my hands. I forced a smile and gestured to Maribel, who raised an eyebrow and slipped her reading glasses down. "Take it," she said softly. "I'll just listen." Before I could lift the phone, she pulled a slim recorder from her purse. "Don't look so surprised," she whispered. "Old courtroom habit. And according to ship safety policy, we're allowed to document calls if we feel at risk." I nodded. "Do it." I pressed the green icon. "Hello, darling," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You caught me between breakfast and sunbathing. Mom." Seren's voice chimed through warm as syrup. "You sound happy. Are you having fun?" "Met anyone interesting?" Her tone was too bright, the kind of sweetness that leaves an aftertaste. "I met a lovely woman named Maribel." "We've been sharing meals," I said. I didn't know why I mentioned her name. It just felt like the right kind of warning to drop. "Oh," Serene's pause was brief but sharp. "That's nice. I didn't think you'd befriend anyone that quickly." "She's a retired judge," I added, my tone almost casual. "Very smart, very observant." Maribel gave me a small, approving nod. Serene laughed lightly. "Well, you've always had a way of attracting strong women, Mom. I'm glad you're not alone." I could almost hear her swallow on the other end. "How's home?" I asked, stirring my coffee though I wasn't thirsty. "Quiet," she said. "Too quiet without you. Hollis misses you already." That was a lie. I could hear it breathing under her words. She hesitated before continuing, her voice softening. "I wanted to check that you're comfortable, that you're not worrying about anything." "Not at all," I said, letting a smile color my tone. "The sea is beautiful, the staff is attentive, and my room has the best view. You were thoughtful to arrange it." "You deserve peace," she said. "You've been tired for so long." "You'll have peace soon, Mom." The words landed like cold water on my skin. Across the table, Maribel's hand paused over her coffee cup, eyes flicking up to mine. The recorder's small red light blinked steadily. I took a slow breath. "That's kind of you, sweetheart," I managed. "Peace sounds lovely." "Yes," Serene murmured. "That's all I ever wanted for you." We spoke a few more minutes, mundane things about meals and weather, before she hung up. When the call ended, the silence pressed in heavy. Maribel reached across the table and covered my trembling hand with hers. "She said it," she whispered. "You'll have peace soon." I nodded, staring out through the glass where sunlight shattered over the waves. The sea looked endless, beautiful, and merciless. "She didn't mean peace," I said quietly. "She meant the end." Maribel's expression hardened, her calm judicial mask returning. "Then we make sure it's hers, not yours." By the fifth day, the rhythm of the ship had become almost hypnotic sunlight over silver water, the faint clink of plates, laughter echoing down the corridors. To anyone watching, I must have looked like another woman savoring her late life adventure. But beneath the calm surface of my smiles, I was counting details, memorizing faces, waiting for something solid to confirm the truth that Seren's voice had already whispered between its polished syllables. It came in the form of a nagging thought. The ticket. I'd never seen one for the flight home. Serene had handled everything, claiming the cruise package included round-trip travel. I'd believed her until now. "Maribel," I said over breakfast, "I want to check something at the passenger office." Her eyes lifted from her teacup, sharp. and understanding. You think she never booked your return? I need to know, I replied. The ship's administrative office was tucked behind the main reception, sleek white, humming with polite efficiency. A young man named Leo stood behind the counter, his uniform immaculate, his smile the practiced one of someone paid to soothe every worry. Good morning, ma'am. How can I assist you? I'd like to verify my full travel itinerary, I said, keeping my tone light. My name is Alarice Wynn, cabin 927. He typed my name into the system, eyes darting across the screen. Then his expression shifted subtle, but there. A pause too long, a flicker of confusion. Mrs. Wynn, he said, I see your reservation here. First-class cabin, 7-day Caribbean voyage, all-inclusive package. He hesitated again. And the return flight, I prompted gently. That's the thing he said. There's no flight listed. The booking ends with disembarkation in Nassau. I stared at him, forcing my voice to stay steady. That must be a mistake. The travel agency promised a round trip. He checked again. The purchase was made under the name Seren Vale. Does that sound familiar? My daughter, I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Leo gave a sympathetic smile. Sometimes return flights are arranged separately. But there's no reservation attached to this package, I'm afraid. Maribel, who had been standing quietly beside me, leaned forward just enough for me to catch the calm steel in her tone. Can Mrs. Wynn purchase her own return ticket now just to be safe? Of course, Leo said, relieved to have a solution. He turned to his computer again. We can secure a seat on the Sunday flight to Charleston leaves at 3:15 p.m. right after docking. I'll take it, I said quickly, handing him my credit card before I could second-guess the decision. My pulse beat fast in my throat. He printed the confirmation and slid the receipt across the counter. Maribel's fingers touched my wrist lightly, a silent instruction. Keep it. Thank you, I said. When we stepped back into the corridor, the ship seemed to tilt slightly, though the sea was calm. Maribel and I walked toward the observation deck, our reflections trailing in the glass walls beside us. Well, she said softly, there's your proof. You were never meant to come back. The paper felt heavy in my hand, thicker than a simple travel receipt weighted with betrayal. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet between my passport and my wedding ring. I thought I'd already accepted it, I said. But seeing it printed her name, not mine, makes it real in a way words never could. Maribel looked out over the water, the horizon blurring into pale blue haze. Documentation, she said, is the language the world listens to. Keep it close. It's not just a receipt. It's survival. I nodded. The proof of my daughter's deceit sat warm against my heart as the ship carried us farther from land, the endless ocean whispering around its hull. And for the first time I realized how far I'd already drifted, not just from the coast, but from the life I'd once trusted completely. It started as a flicker in the corner of my eye, a man standing near the espresso bar as I crossed the atrium, pretending to read the day's itinerary. He was around 40, maybe a bit older, with a weathered face and an easy, unbothered stance that didn't quite match the alertness in his eyes. He wore a green linen shirt, rolled to the elbows, and shoes polished too neatly for a vacationer. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Ships had patterns. Passengers crossed paths. But that same afternoon, I saw him again on the upper deck, near the pool, leaning on the rail, the same faint smirk playing on his lips. When I met Maribel for tea, I mentioned him casually, as if testing the words in the open air. There's a man I keep noticing, I said. Green shirt. Always seems to be 2 steps behind. Maribel didn't look surprised. She stirred her tea, once slow and deliberate. Describe him. I did. She listened without interruption, then reached for her small leather notebook, the same one she'd used to jot details about my call with Seren. What time did you first notice him? She asked. Around 11 near the cafe, I said, then again by the pool at 3. She made 2 quick notes, then looked up. We'll see if the pattern continues. People reveal themselves by repetition. The next morning proved her right. I went to the promenade deck after breakfast, hoping to breathe in the salt air and still my thoughts. The sun was pale behind thin clouds, the horizon a clean sweep of silver. A crew member passed offering towels, and for a moment I felt almost at peace until I turned. There he was again, the same man in green seated at a nearby table, a newspaper open but unread. His eyes slid away the instant they met mine. I walked calmly toward the railing, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. Below, the ocean rippled in long ribbons of blue and white. My pulse thudded in my throat, steady as the ship's engines. Later that afternoon, I met Maribel in the library. She'd spent part of the day quietly observing him herself. "You're not imagining it," she said under her breath, leaning close enough that our shoulders touched. "He's been near you at least 4 times today, Atrium Cafe, deck, promenade, dining hall, and the corridor to your cabin." My stomach twisted. "So he's following me." She nodded once. "And he's not staff." I checked the roster board outside crew quarters. No green shirt, no face like his. We sat in silence for a long moment, broken only by the shuffle of pages from nearby readers. "I saw his shoes," I said finally, "at the Charleston terminal. He was by the boarding ramp when I arrived. I remember because the leather was scuffed near the toe like someone who walks with his right foot turned out." Maribel's pen froze over her notebook. "So he's been watching you since land." The library suddenly felt smaller, the air thinner. "What should we do?" I whispered. "For now, nothing rash," she said. "Let him believe you haven't noticed. Fear makes people careless. We'll document everything, time, location, behavior. When the pattern is clear, we go to the captain." Her calm steadied me, but beneath it, I could sense the same tension, coiled like wire. That evening, I took a different route to the dining hall through a side corridor that smelled faintly of varnish. Yet when I reached the main entrance, he was there again, leaning on the rail, that same unread newspaper in hand. Our eyes met briefly. He smiled, then small and knowing, as if he already understood that I'd seen through the act. I kept walking. My heels clicked evenly on the marble floor, echoing the sound of my heartbeat. Behind me, I could feel his gaze follow until the music from the lounge swallowed it whole. Later, in Maribel's cabin, I told her everything. She jotted it all down, her handwriting sharp and decisive. "He's circling closer," she said, "which means the plan's moving." Outside the window, the sea stretched endless and calm, but I knew better now. Calm was only what the surface wanted you to believe. The morning after Maribel confirmed the man in green had followed me yet again, I woke before dawn. The cabin was dark, except for a faint shimmer of light seeping through the curtains. The ship rocked gently, as if trying to lull me into forgetting what I knew. But sleep wouldn't come. The stillness of the room only made the truth louder. I sat at the small desk by the balcony and opened my laptop. The internet signal on board was slow, expensive, and unpredictable, but it was enough for what I needed. I drafted an email to someone I hadn't contacted in years. Kellen Reese, a private investigator based in Charleston. Kellen and I had once served on the same neighborhood watch committee back when my world was still quiet. My biggest worries, the raccoons tipping over the trash bins. After his retirement from law enforcement, he'd started his own investigative agency. I remembered him as practical, discreet, and loyal to a fault. The message took shape slowly under my trembling fingers. Subject urgent, personal matter. "Kellen, it's Alarice Wynn. We met through the East Battery Neighborhood Association years ago. I need your help quietly. I'm currently on a cruise my daughter arranged. I believe she and her husband are attempting to stage an accident at sea. Please investigate any financial records tied to Sarin Vale and Hollis Vale, specifically gambling debts, loans, or life insurance policies in my name. I'll be unreachable for several days, but will check messages whenever the connection allows." A. Win. When I pressed send, a wave of calm washed through me. I'd taken my first step from fear to strategy. By afternoon, I had his reply. From K. Reese, subject, urgent personal matter. Alarice, got your message. You always had a gut for when something didn't smell right. I'll dig immediately. Sit tight. Keep your head low and don't confront anyone yet. I'll send updates when I have something solid. K. It took him less than a day to deliver the first results. The email arrived late the next night, while Maribel and I were reviewing our notes about the man in green. The ship's Wi-Fi flickered, forcing me to refresh the inbox twice before the message appeared. From K. Reese, subject, updates on Seren and Hollis Vale, Alarice. You were right to contact me. Hollis has multiple gambling accounts across offshore betting sites, most recently flagged for suspicious transactions. He owes roughly $180,000 to a private lender connected to a casino syndicate in Savannah. Seren co-signed a business loan 6 months ago, using your Charleston property as collateral without your authorization. The documents appear forged. I also found a life insurance policy issued 3 months ago listing you as the insured and Seren as sole beneficiary. Policy value $500,000. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. It's premeditated. I'm compiling copies of the documents and verified transaction trails. Everything will be ready by the time you dock. Keep your wits about you. The kind of people they're in debt to don't wait politely for repayment. K. Reese. I read the message twice, my pulse steady now, not with panic, but precision. Maribel looked up from her notebook as I slid the screen toward her. She read in silence, her expression hardening. Well, she murmured, the motive's no longer theory. I nodded. They built a trap out of paper and ink. They just forgot their mother knew how to read. Maribel's eyes gleamed. And now you have the one thing they didn't count on proof. I closed the laptop, the hum of the ship beneath us blending with the slow thunder of my heartbeat. Seren had thought she could erase me quietly, turn inheritance into escape money. But what she didn't know was that I had just turned her scheme into evidence. For the first time since this voyage began, I wasn't the hunted anymore. I was gathering the net. The next evening, the ship glittered like a ballroom adrift on dark water. Music rose from the casino deck, brass horns, laughter, the rhythm of coins sliding into machines. Maribel and I stood by the bar, pretending to be two old widows with more champagne than sense. Are you certain about this? She murmured, her tone calm, but edged. Absolutely, I replied, swirling my glass so the bubbles caught the light. He's been circling too long. It's time he believes the performance. Maribel nodded once, then drifted toward a poker table, positioning herself so she could see me without being obvious. She carried her small notebook and the discreet recorder we now treated like armor. I perched on a high stool crossing my ankles and gave the impression of mild intoxication. A lifetime of PTA meetings and polite charity dinners had taught me how to wear a mask. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. Within minutes, the man in the green shirt appeared. Not the same linen one tonight, he wore navy pressed and crisp, but I recognized him by the watch on his wrist, the faint scuff on his right shoe. He lingered near the roulette table, pretending interest, though his eyes kept sliding toward me. I laughed a little too loudly at nothing, letting the sound spill into the air. When I reached for my drink, my elbow accidentally brushed a napkin to the floor. He took the bait. Careful there, he said, stooping to pick it up before I could. His voice was low, roughened by years of cigarettes or secrets. Oh, thank you, I said with a sheepish smile. I seem to be all thumbs tonight. This sea air must be getting to my head. He chuckled, leaning just close enough for the scent of cologne, something sharp, synthetic. First cruise. Is it that obvious? I slurred gently, resting my hand on the rim of my glass. My daughter insisted. Said I needed to relax. Can you imagine 68 years of working and suddenly they want you to drink Mai Tais and forget the world? He smiled, polite and predatory. You should enjoy it. Life's short. Oh, I intend to, I said, though I'm terribly clumsy. The railings out there make me nervous. I can't stand being too close to the edge. The ship moves and I swear my balance goes with it. That made him pause. His gaze flickered just for a breath, calculating. I kept my tone light, swirling my drink, as though confessing a harmless quirk. I almost didn't take this trip, I added, lowering my voice conspiratorially. But my daughter booked everything. Said it would be the perfect escape. She's very persuasive. He laughed softly. She sounds thoughtful. Oh, she's... Something I said, letting my smile fade just enough to seem wistful. He looked at me for a long moment, then set down his empty glass. Well, Mrs. Wynne, I supplied. Mrs. Wynne, it's been a pleasure. He nodded courteously, already retreating. Enjoy your cruise. And watch those railings. I will, I said, lifting my glass in mock salute. He walked off, blending into the hum of the crowd. I waited, counting heartbeats, until I saw him stop at the far end of the casino, near the bank of public phones. He picked one up, his back turned, but posture tense. Maribel appeared beside me, her eyes following mine. He's making the call. We couldn't hear the words, only see the gestures, the sharp movement of his hand, the tilt of his head, as if confirming instructions. After a minute, he hung up and disappeared into the corridor leading toward the passenger cabins. I exhaled slowly. He took the bait. Maribel nodded. And he's reporting to someone who thinks you're too clumsy to survive a railing. I finished my drink in one swallow, the taste of champagne gone bitter. Then let's make sure they're the ones who trip. Outside the casino windows, the sea was black glass, stretching forever. For the first time, it didn't scare me. I wasn't prey anymore. I was setting the board. The morning after the casino, I awoke to the low hum of the ship's engines and the faint clang of dishes in the hall. My head throbbed from too little sleep and too much pretense. Maribel had left a note on my desk in her elegant, looping handwriting, 9 a.m. Captain's quarters. Bring the phone and the receipt. I dressed quickly, tucking the folded proof of my purchased return ticket into my purse beside the small recorder. By the time I reached the upper deck, the sea had turned a soft, pewter gray under scattered clouds. Captain Leontine Graves was nothing like I expected. She stood behind her desk, tall and poised, with the quiet authority of someone used to storms both on water and off. Her uniform was immaculate silver hair pulled into a braid that revealed a faint scar tracing her temple. Beside her sat Chief Security Officer Dax Mercer, broad-shouldered and silent, his tablet already glowing with data. Mrs. Wynne Captain Graves greeted me, gesturing to a seat. Judge Crane has brought me up to speed. Please tell me what you've experienced in your own words. Maribel sat next to me, calm but alert. I told them everything, from Seren's too-sweet invitation to the man in the green shirt, the missing return ticket, and the overheard call from the casino. My voice didn't tremble once. I played the recordings from Seren's check-in call and the brief background noise of the man's phone conversation. When it ended, the captain folded her hands. You did well documenting this, she said. Many passengers ignore their instincts until it's too late. Chief Mercer leaned forward, scrolling through images Maribel had taken discreetly. The man at the bar. His reflection in a mirror. His phone lifted to his ear. This matches a report we filed last month, he said. A subcontractor dismissed for harassment on a previous cruise using false credentials. He boarded under another name. So he's not staff, I said quietly. No, the captain replied. But someone paid for his passage. We can't yet prove who. Maribel met her eyes. We both know where the money trail will lead. The captain nodded once decisive. Here's what we'll do. Mercer brought up a map of the ship. We're adding cameras to the corridor outside your cabin and the adjacent stairwell. 2 plainclothes guards will rotate near your door starting tonight. You'll also carry this. He slid a small device across the desk, a discreet panic transmitter, no larger than a lipstick tube. I turned it over in my palm. If I press it, every security feed on your deck goes live to my console, he said. We'll be there within 30 seconds. The captain's expression softened. Tomorrow night's the gala. Large crowds create cover. If the man's following orders, that's when he'll move. We'll use that opportunity to catch him cleanly, legally, and with witnesses. Maribel smiled faintly. A stage and an audience. Perfect. Captain Graves extended her hand. Mrs. Wynne, from this moment you're under the ship's protection, but you must act natural. Let him think you're still unaware. I can manage that, I said. I've been pretending for years. When we left the captain's quarters, the wind had shifted brisk, colder. The horizon glowed faintly ahead, the sea endless and uncertain. For the first time since boarding, I wasn't just surviving. I had an army on my side. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in music and light. The Ecliptica dawn glowed like a floating ballroom, its glass walls shimmering with reflections of the sea. Every passenger seemed transformed pearls, silk tuxedos, laughter loud enough to drown the whisper of the waves below. I stood before the mirror in my cabin, adjusting the green satin dress Maribel had insisted I wear. It suits you, she'd said earlier, fastening the clasp at my neck. Calm, poised, and dangerous when necessary. I looked composed, but my pulse beat hard beneath the fabric. The lipstick-sized panic device sat hidden in my clutch, its weight a quiet reminder of the plan in motion. By 8 o'clock, the orchestra had begun to play. Maribel waited for me near the grand staircase, her crimson shawl a signal we'd agreed upon. Across the atrium, Chief Mercer stood at the bar, pretending to flirt with a guest, his earpiece glinting faintly under the chandeliers. 2 other security officers mingled through the crowd, indistinguishable from ordinary guests. Everything appeared normal. That was the point. I played my role, the cheerful widow with too much champagne and too many stories. I danced once, twice, smiled at strangers, and even laughed when the band switched to an old Sinatra tune. Every few minutes my eyes swept the balcony level, where the shadows deepened between the decorative palms. Nothing. Near 10, Maribel drifted close under the pretense of adjusting her shawl. Captain says the corridor's clear, she murmured. He'll move soon. Go back to your cabin as planned. I nodded once and slipped away through the west hall, heart hammering. The corridor outside my suite was hushed, muffled by carpet and distance from the music. My heels made soft, rhythmic clicks as I walked, every sound amplified by tension. When I reached my door, I hesitated for one measured breath, then entered. The room was exactly as I'd left it, neat untouched. I placed my clutch on the table, exhaled, and waited. It didn't take long. A faint scrape came from the balcony door, metal against metal. My stomach clenched. The handle turned slowly, then stopped. Another sound followed, softer, deliberate, the click of a lockpick. I took one step back, pressing my fingers against the panic device inside my clutch, but not activating it yet. The door eased open, letting in a slice of ocean air. The man in the dark jacket stepped through soundlessly. No more green shirt, no pretense. Just purpose. He crossed halfway into the room before the lights burst on. Stop right there. Mercer's voice cut through the silence. 2 guards surged from the connecting cabin, pinning him before he could reach his pocket. The panic button slipped from my hand. I hadn't even needed to press it. The intruder didn't struggle. He froze, jaw tight, eyes darting toward me with something close to contempt or pity. The guards wrenched a small pouch from his coat. Mercer opened it and laid the contents on the desk, A slender vial of clear liquid, a capped syringe, and a set of lockpicks polished from use. Then came the phone. Cheap black, its message screen still open. Mercer scrolled once, his face hardening. "Captain, you'll want to see this." Captain Graves entered moments later, composed even now. She glanced at the screen, then turned it toward me. There it was. Seren's number. Her name at the top of the thread. The messages glowed stark against the screen. Cabin 927. Tonight, after 10. Make sure it looks like a fall. Payment after confirmation. My knees almost gave way, but I steadied myself on the desk. There was no longer room for doubt. No safe place for denial. Graves gave a short command and the guards led the man away. His silence heavier than any confession. When the door closed behind them, Maribel appeared from the adjoining cabin. She looked at me quietly. No triumph in her expression, just a kind of sorrow. "It's over," she said. But as I looked at the glowing screen, I knew it wasn't. The ocean outside was calm, yes, but somewhere beyond it, the person who'd set this in motion still breathed freely. And she was my daughter. By the time dawn broke, the Ecliptica dawn was eerily quiet. The gala decorations still shimmered faintly under the pale light, seeping through the glass atrium, but the laughter and music from the night before had vanished, leaving only the soft hum of the engines and the distant rush of waves. Captain Graves had kept her word. Security detained the man in the brig, and the phone with Seren's messages was sealed in an evidence bag. I'd given my statement, every word steady as if speaking for someone else. When it was done, Graves placed a hand on my shoulder. "You have the right to confront her, Mrs. Wynne. Just be sure that's what you want." It was. I returned to my cabin, the same room where the air had once felt too still to breathe. The light off the ocean flickered across the walls like fractured glass. I picked up my phone, connected to the ship's satellite line, and scrolled to my daughter's name. The moment I pressed call, my hand went cold. It rang once, twice, then connected. Mom Saren's voice was groggy, unsure. "It's early, are you all right?" Her tone was so natural that for a breath I almost believed in another reality, the kind where she was just my child again, not the architect of my destruction. "I'm fine," I said, my voice calm. "He's been caught." A pause. "Who?" "The man you hired," I replied. "They found your messages on his phone." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the ocean dared intrude. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, her words tight, brittle. "Yes, you do." Her breathing quickened. "Mom, you're confused. Someone must be setting me up. Hollis and I—" "Don't," I said softly. "Please don't lie again. It's all there, your number, your instructions. Cabin 927. Make it look like a fall." There was a faint sound, maybe her hand shaking, maybe her breath catching. Then a single word so small I almost missed it. "Why?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Because there wasn't one that could hold the weight of what she'd done. I was going to fix everything she said suddenly. It wasn't supposed to go that far. "We just needed money," I cut in. "You needed money, so you decided I was worth more dead than alive." Her sob cracked through the line. "I didn't mean—" "But you planned," I said. "You organized, you hired, you waited. You knew what would happen and you counted on me not to see it coming." "Mom, please," that word stopped me cold. "Don't call me that," I said quietly. "You lost that right the moment you signed my death into someone else's hands." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just the hollow static of distance, the space between forgiveness and finality. Then I ended the call. The phone slipped from my hand onto the desk. Outside, the sea stretched wide and merciless, the same color as the sky. Somewhere in that endless horizon, my daughter still existed. But she no longer belonged to the woman staring out at the water. I'd raised her to stand tall, to speak truth, to live with grace. But tonight, I had learned what she never had, how to survive alone. The morning after the confrontation, the sky was the color of steel. The Ecliptica dawn moved slowly across calm waters, but inside the ship, everything pulsed with quiet urgency. Captain Graves met me in her office again. Her expression measured composed. The air smelled faintly of salt and paper documents spread across her desk, each stamped with the ship's crest. "The maritime report is complete," she said. "Your daughter's messages and the recordings have been logged as primary evidence. The suspect remains in custody until we dock in Nassau tomorrow. From there, he'll be transferred to federal authorities." She turned the sealed evidence bag in her hands, the black phone glinting faintly behind its clear plastic. "This," she said, "will make sure no one calls it an accident." Beside her, Chief Mercer sorted through a drive of CCTV footage, each file marked with timestamps and deck numbers. He caught my eye, gave a short nod of reassurance. "You did everything right, Mrs. Wynne. You stayed alive and left a trail. That's more than most victims ever manage." Victim. The word landed oddly in my chest. I didn't feel like one. Not anymore. I signed the last page of my statement, my signature neat, despite the tremor in my hand. When I stood, Captain Graves reached out. "We'll contact Charleston authorities as soon as we dock," she said. "But I suspect your investigator will get there first." She was right. Back in my cabin, I opened my laptop to find an email waiting from Kellen Reese. Subject: Confirmation and Financial Trail, Alarice. You were correct again. I traced 2 wire transfers from Saren's joint account, each to a shell contractor connected to the same name as your onboard assailant. Both transfers originated 3 weeks before the cruise. Documentation secure and notarized. I've also contacted a federal liaison. They'll be waiting in Nassau. K. Reese. I reread the message twice, though I understood every word the first time. It was proof final and merciless. My daughter hadn't made a mistake in panic or ignorance. She'd planned this months ahead, methodical as a business deal. Maribel stopped by in the afternoon with tea and that calm judicial gravity she wore like armor. "It's nearly over," she said gently. "Nearly," I echoed. But that night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the small porthole watching the horizon turn from silver to black, the stars shimmering over water that looked too peaceful to hold so much pain. My reflection hovered faintly in the glass, older, sharper, and lonelier than before. I thought about motherhood, how it begins as devotion and slowly becomes endurance. You build your life around a child brick by brick, only to realize one day they've stepped out of the house and taken your heart with them. Somewhere out there, Seren was still free, breathing, pacing, maybe rehearsing her denial. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of her. What frightened me was what remained, the hollow ache of love that refused to die, even when betrayed beyond reason. When dawn came, I folded Kellen's email printout and placed it inside my journal. Proof and grief bound together by paper and ink. The ship kept moving east, and I let it, because sometimes survival isn't about running toward peace. It's about knowing you can live inside the wreckage and still breathe. When the Ecliptica dawn reached Nassau, the air was bright and sharp with salt, the kind of heat that made everything shimmer. Passengers crowded the rails, laughing, waving at the approaching docks, unaware that in the lowest deck of the ship, a man in handcuffs sat waiting for federal agents. I stood beside Captain Graves as uniformed officers boarded. The lead investigator, a calm woman named Agent Pilar Nance, spoke briefly with the captain, then turned to me. "Mrs. Wynne, she said you've been remarkably composed through all this. We'll take it from here. The suspect has already waived counsel." She didn't need to add what that meant. The man had realized his employers wouldn't come to rescue him. When he was escorted down the gangway, his expression was flat, almost relieved. The ocean glittered behind him like a closing curtain. Maribel walked me to the pier, her red shawl fluttering in the wind. "Promise me you'll rest when you get home," she said. I smiled faintly. After I finish what's left. Ah, she sighed. Justice before rest. I should have known. From Nassau, I flew straight to Charleston. The sky a vast pale blue stretched over the marshes. Kellen was waiting just beyond customs, tall, slightly grayer than I remembered wearing that same weathered leather jacket from the old neighborhood meetings. Alarice, he greeted, his voice rough, with both relief and admiration. You look like hell. I've earned it, I said. He chuckled. Let's finish this then. We drove through the familiar streets, the live oaks arching above us, like memory itself. At the district attorney's office, we met Assistant DA Claire Monroe, a woman with sharp eyes and a tone that wasted no time. Kellen laid out the evidence, the wire transfers, the forged loan documents, the life insurance policy, and the maritime report, signed by Captain Graves. When he reached the phone messages, Monroe's gaze hardened. This is airtight, she said. We'll issue warrants immediately. Your daughter and her husband won't get far. But even her confidence couldn't prepare me for what came next. That evening, as Kellen and I sat in his office, waiting for updates, his phone buzzed. He listened for a few seconds, then looked up. They found them, he said quietly. Where? At a private airstrip outside Savannah. Hollis had cash fake passports and Seren's laptop. They were boarding a charter plane. I closed my eyes. For a moment, all the noise in the world, the hum of traffic outside, the whir of the ceiling fan, seemed to fade into silence. Are they in custody? He said gently. Federal charges plus attempted murder across state lines. It's done, Alarice. I didn't answer right away. My body felt weightless, as if justice had gravity, but no comfort. I'd imagined this moment her arrest had her schemes undone, but in reality, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning that had learned how to walk. Kellen poured coffee into a paper cup and slid it toward me. You know, he said, most people would have panicked. You built a case. I stared at the steam curling above the dark liquid. I built her too, I murmured. And somewhere along the way I forgot that love can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He nodded slowly. Maybe not. But it saved you. When the official call came confirming the arrests, Kellen handed me the phone. The voice on the other end was polite, clinical. I thanked them, hung up, and set the receiver down with care. Outside his office window, the Charleston harbor glowed under twilight, the water calm again after all its storms. I thought of the sea's endless rhythm, how it takes what it wants, returns what it must, and leaves you standing at the edge, wondering what it all means. Justice had come, yes, but peace that was something else entirely. 3 months later, Charleston's courthouse smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant. I sat in the witness stand, palms resting on the wooden rail, my heart steady in a way it hadn't been in years. Across the room, Seren sat between two defense attorneys, her wrists bare, her hair pulled back as if neatness could restore what she'd lost. Hollis sat beside her, eyes fixed on the floor. The prosecutor's questions came clearly practiced and precise. I answered each one with the same quiet clarity I'd once used in my classroom dates, actions proof. When they played the recording of her voice saying, "No one questions a fall at sea," the courtroom went still. Even the ceiling fans seemed to stop. Serene didn't look at me. Not once. The verdict came after a short deliberation. 18 years for Seren, 10 for Hollis. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. The judge's gavel fell final and echoing. I thought I'd feel triumph, or at least release, but what I felt instead was a deep, weary quiet, like standing in the eye of a storm that had already taken everything worth shouting for. Afterward, Kellen met me on the courthouse steps. "It's over," he said gently. I nodded. Almost. Within weeks, I sold the old house. The rooms that once held laughter now felt like hollow memorials to who we'd been before greed hollowed us out. The realtor asked if I wanted to keep the chandelier in the dining room. I told her no. Some light isn't worth carrying forward. I bought a modest cottage near the coast, small enough to clean in a day, close enough to the water that the tides hummed through the walls at night. There, I learned to live quietly again. I gardened. I cooked simple meals. Sometimes I left the radio on just to hear another voice. One afternoon, Maribel visited on her way north. She brought a basket of citrus and a newsletter from an elder advocacy group she'd joined in Miami, volunteers helping seniors navigate financial abuse and predatory loans. "They could use someone like you," she said, pressing the pamphlet into my hands. 2 weeks later, I joined their Charleston chapter. The first time I sat across from an older woman trembling over a forged document, I felt something inside me mend, not fully, but enough to keep breathing without bitterness. I told her that survival wasn't about strength. It was about refusing to disappear. The days passed gently after that. The ocean became my metronome, steady and forgiving. I kept one framed photo of Seren taken when she was 8, missing front teeth, hair windblown, laughing as if the world would always be kind. Some days I could look at it. Other days I couldn't. Still, I never took it down. Because memory, even when it wounds, is proof that love once existed, and that sometimes it's worth living on its ashes to build something new. The morning light over Charleston Bay had a softness I hadn't felt in years. It fell across the porch of my cottage in long, gentle strokes, warming the wicker chair where I sat with a cup of tea. The sea beyond the dunes was calm, a mirror of pale blue that shifted with the wind. I had spent the early hours stringing together the pieces of my past, quite literally. On the small table beside me lay the old brass keys from the house I'd sold, one for the front door, one for the garden gate, one for the study, where I'd once kept letters from Seren. I threaded them onto a length of driftwood, tying each with quiet precision. When I held it up, the keys shimmered in the light, like muted gold. It took only a small breeze for them to sing. The sound was delicate, uncertain at first, then sure. My wind chimes, a reminder that even what once locked me in could now move freely in the air. Maribel arrived just before noon, her familiar red shawl wrapped over a linen dress. She carried a paper bag that smelled faintly of citrus and coffee. "I brought croissants," she said, setting it down, "and something else." From her purse, she drew out a small bottle of white wine. "Celebration," she added, her eyes gleaming, "for peace that doesn't feel like surrender." We sat together on the porch, the sound of the chimes blending with the hush of the bay. The air was warm but kind. "You look different," she said after a while. "Lighter." "I suppose I am," I said, watching the light skip across the water. "It's strange. Peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just shows up one morning and sits quietly beside you." Maribel smiled. "And you let it stay." We toasted with small glasses, the wine cool against the afternoon. She told me about her new work in Miami, the judges she'd trained in elder advocacy, the progress her son was making with reconciliation therapy. Life moving on in its imperfect grace. When she left later that afternoon, the sun had dipped low, turning the water bronze. I stood by the porch rail listening to the wind chimes sing. Their tones mingled with the rhythm of the tide, a duet between past and present. Inside the cottage, my volunteer badge from the Advocacy Center hung beside the door. Every week, I helped others find their footing, people like me who had trusted too much, who needed to remember that dignity wasn't arrogance, just a boundary drawn with love. Sometimes, when the sessions ended, I'd drive to the edge of the pier and watch the boats returning. The sea never changed, but I had. That evening, I sat again on the porch, the horizon slowly dissolving into dusk. I thought about all the versions of myself the years had carved: teacher, mother, widow, survivor. I had been built by love, tested by betrayal, and remade by the simple act of choosing to keep living. The wind rose softly, lifting the chimes into motion. The keys clinked against one another, small, imperfect notes that sounded like forgiveness. I whispered the words I'd carried with me since the night the storm broke. Love built me. Boundaries saved me. The sound of the chimes answered gentle and steady as the first stars appeared above the bay. For the first time in a long time, the horizon didn't seem like an ending. It felt like a mirror showing me not where the world stopped, but where I finally began.